Mark checked his datapad while he waited beside the holographic communication sphere. The sleek, futuristic room of the Aurora was filled with a quiet hum of technology. He was about to present his report to the High Command of Xenon, and the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him. One last time, he adjusted his dark blue uniform, ensuring it was immaculate and within regulations. The insignia of a senior intelligence officer gleamed on his chest, a reminder of his responsibility. As the holographic sphere flickered to life, Mark snapped to attention. The faces of the Supreme Commander, 5 Grand Admirals, and 5 Grand Stratos of the Army appeared around the table. Their stern expressions filled the room with an aura of authority and expectation. Inquisitor Harris, Senior Intelligence Officer, or Ion Sector Command. Reporting is ordered, Mark announced, saluting crisply. Be seated, Inquisitor. The Supreme Commander's voice rumbled through the sphere's audio system. Yes, sir, Mark replied, taking a seat in front of the sphere. He placed his datapad on the table and took a deep breath to steady his nerves. We called this meeting to discuss an intel report sent by you and flagged as high priority, the Supreme Commander began. There are some on the Council that doubt the veracity of this report. Grand Admiral Island leaned forward. Do not take this as a slight on your abilities, Inquisitor Harris, but the High Command needs to clarify this report. We did not think it possible for the humans to field the numbers you reported. Mark nodded, understanding their skepticism. I understand, sir. The information was gathered through extensive monitoring and multiple verification processes. The Grand Admiral continued. If these numbers are accurate, it will require shifting a significant portion of our fleets and army units. The Supreme Commander spoke up again. We have also had reports of a buildup in the TK system, but much smaller than the one in your report. Explain how this intel was gathered and provide an updated report on human activity in the Sumac system. I hear and obey, Supreme Commander, Mark replied. He began his report, detailing the past 3 perics of observations. For the past 3 perics, we've noticed a decrease in usual communications and ship traffic into the Sumac system. We ran diagnostics on our equipment and found no issues. It was the source of the missing signals that caught our attention. He paused to bring up an image in the holographic sphere, displaying a graph of radiation signatures. This graph shows the sources of the signals we monitor. If you look at the last source, it's the radiation signature given off by the reactors on the civilian mining outpost. We use that signature as a baseline for the radiation output and natural signals given off by the system star and orbiting bodies. Mark pointed to the time frame that coincided with 3 perics ago. The radiation signatures spiked and then began to fade until they were gone. Checking against the other parts of the baseline showed no stellar activity to cause that. Grand Stratos Tickus asked, couldn't they have just shut down the reactors or had an accident? Mark brought up another image. Human reactors are far inferior to our own and give off more signatures than ours. This graph shows the shutdown of the reactors in the Eclairon system just prior to our invasion. They were trying to evacuate all their assets before we arrived. As I said, their energy sources are inferior and take 5 times the amount of time to shut down. He continued, this shows the signature for a reactor we destroyed when we invaded the Neeg system. There was a massive burst of radiation at the moment of destruction. Neither of those shows up in our monitoring of the Sumac system. Mark pointed to the spike in radiation signatures again. These match previous readings of new reactors being brought online. Either the humans made a massive technological jump to improve their reactors, or they were masking the signal somehow. The room was silent, the council members processing the information. Mark continued, it was only a few rotations before we noticed some of our intelligence assets, both living beings and electronics, started going dark. This was enough to pique our curiosity, and we sent some of our cloaked reconnaissance probes to the system. We thought they were lost because we weren't getting any signals back, so we sent another one. We then sent a third, but gave it orders to return after 1 rotation of the planet the humans occupied. The Supreme Commander leaned forward, intrigued. And what did you find? The humans have found a way to block all artificial signals from leaving the system. Even our communications between our probes were restricted inside the system. That also explains our assets going dark. But we didn't know why they did this. So we sent the probe back to get close enough to change the orders of the other two probes to leave the system at preset times and transmit their data. Mark changed the image to one of the sumac system with probe locations marked. We snuck one of the probes close enough to begin receiving information from our assets on the station. The next intel dump is when we received reports of increased human activity and new construction on several habitable moons. The council members exchanged glances, realizing the significance of the findings. Mark concluded, this initial intel indicated a gathering fleet. At first, it was only a dozen warships, 3 capitals and their support ships, but dozens more were arriving with each passing Perak. The Supreme Commander nodded, signaling Mark to continue with his detailed report. The fate of their strategic plans hinged on this crucial intelligence. Inquisitor Harris took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the room's expectations. The faces of the Supreme Commander and the other council members were stern and expectant. He knew he had to convey the gravity of the situation with precision and clarity. As I was saying, the initial intelligence indicated a buildup of human forces in the sumac system, Harris continued. Our recon probes detected substantial activity on several habitable moons. This includes the construction of new military bases and an influx of ground forces. He tapped his datapad, and the holographic sphere displayed images of the moons, each marked with red dots indicating human installations. Our assets reported large numbers of ground troops arriving and being transported to these new bases. So far, they have counted the insignia of no less than 8 divisions. 8 divisions? Grand Admiral Island interjected, his eyebrows raising in disbelief. That's an unprecedented number. Are you certain? Yes, sir, Harris replied confidently. Previous intelligence reports have listed a human division to be approximately 25,000 soldiers. Our estimates suggest that the current total number of ground forces in the sumac system is at least 200,000 troops. The council members murmured among themselves, processing the implications of such a formidable force. Harris switched to another screen, showing a detailed analysis of the human fleet. The latest probe signal, received just before this meeting, provided us with updated information on the human fleet. We estimate that they now have over 1,500 warships and several hundred other types of vessels, mostly troop transports. This includes around 500 capital ships, Harris explained, his voice steady but urgent. He checked his datapad again to ensure accuracy. Among these are 5 supercarriers, 100 standard carriers, 200 battleship-class vessels, and about 200 heavy cruisers. The remaining fleet is a mix of sub-capitals, including light cruisers, frigates, destroyers, and corvettes. Our best estimate is that the supercarriers alone can carry up to 7,500 strike craft. The Supreme Commander leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And their target? Do we have any idea where they intend to strike? We've picked up increased reconnaissance activity in the balloon system, Harris replied, bringing up another holographic image of the system. Our asset also gathered pieces of information that suggest the balloon system might be their next objective. One of the Grand Stratos, a recent addition to the High Council, leaned back in his chair, perplexed. The balloon system? It has no strategic value. Why would they target it? Before Harris could respond, Grand Admiral Island spoke up. Not by itself, but the balloon system makes a good stepping-off point to other systems that could serve as effective staging grounds to strike at 7 significant worlds, both militarily and industrially. The revelation caused a stir among the council members. The Supreme Commander turned to Harris, his expression grave. And what about the TK system buildup? How does it fit into their plans? After consulting with the intelligence staff monitoring the TK system, we believe it's a diversion, Harris said. The human forces there are much smaller, around 150 ships near the 4th planet starbase, including troop transports. Their attempts to prevent our reconnaissance of the system are not as effective as in the past. We think they want us to see them. Harris displayed scans of the TK system, highlighting the smaller human presence. They are dangling a force dangerous enough to take the Jacker system, but not sufficient to face our current defenses there. Meanwhile, the human buildup in the sumac system outnumbers our total force in that sector 4 times over. The room fell silent again, the weight of the information sinking in. The Supreme Commander finally spoke. Inquisitor Harris, Your report is both alarming and crucial. Normally, someone of your security level wouldn't be informed of these plans ahead of time. But given the circumstances, we need immediate updates on the intel. You will report directly to us, bypassing your superiors. Understood, sir, Harris replied, feeling the immense responsibility settle on his shoulders. The Supreme Commander continued, "We are going to transfer the 1st, 3rd, and 8th fleets from the Jacker system and the Lanari systems to the Sumac system. 2 more fleets will come from a more secure sector of the Empire. 5 of the 6 army groups in the Jacker system will also be relocated." Admiral Island added, "We will take an indirect route to avoid detection. Besides monitoring the human buildup, you are to also watch for any sign of our movements being detected." Harris nodded, understanding the critical nature of his mission. The next few rotations would be a whirlwind of activity and vigilance, ensuring the movement of Xenon forces remained undetected while keeping a close eye on the human threat. As the meeting concluded, he couldn't shake the feeling that the fate of the Empire rested on his shoulders and the accuracy of his intelligence. The following rotations were a blur of activity for Mark. The task of updating the latest intelligence on the human buildup and ensuring the covert movement of Xenon forces consumed his every waking moment. The enormity of the impending conflict loomed over him like a shadow, and he felt the weight of the responsibility bearing down on him. On the 5th rotation, the Supreme Commander summoned him again. The communication sphere flickered to life, and Mark stood at attention. "Inquisitor Harris, we need an update on the human activity in the Sumac system," the Supreme Commander ordered. "Yes, sir," Mark replied, bringing up the latest data on his datapad. The human forces continue to grow. Our estimates now put their fleet at over 1,800 warships. The number of capital ships remains consistent, but there has been a notable increase in support vessels and troop transports. Ground forces have swelled to approximately 250,000 troops, including additional artillery and armored divisions. The Grand Admirals and Stratos exchanged concerned glances. The Supreme Commander's eyes narrowed. "And what about the TK system?" "Our latest reconnaissance confirms that the human presence there remains minimal. We still believe it's a diversion. Their attempts to obscure our surveillance have not improved, and their force is not strong enough to pose a significant threat to our defenses," Mark explained. Grand Admiral Island leaned forward. "What about the movements of our fleets? Have you detected any signs of human awareness?" "Not yet, Admiral," Mark replied. "Our routes have been carefully planned to avoid detection, and so far, there have been no indications that the humans are aware of our strategic redeployment." The Supreme Commander nodded. "Good. Continue your surveillance and keep us informed of any changes. This mission is critical to the safety of the Empire." "Understood, sir," Mark responded, feeling the gravity of the situation deepen. As the days passed, the tension on the Aurora grew. Mark's team worked tirelessly, analyzing data and refining their strategies. The pressure was immense, but failure was not an option. They had to ensure that the human buildup was genuine and that their own forces remained undetected. Then, on the 12th rotation, everything changed. Mark was in the command center, reviewing the latest reports, when an urgent alert flashed on his screen. One of their cloaked probes had transmitted new data from the Sumac system. He quickly accessed the information, his heart pounding. The data showed a significant decrease in human activity. The fleet that had been amassing in the system was gone, and the ground forces had vanished. Mark's eyes widened in disbelief. How could such a large force disappear so quickly? He immediately contacted the Supreme Commander. The communication sphere activated, and Mark stood at attention. "Supreme Commander, we have a critical update from the Sumac system," he reported. "The human forces have disappeared. The fleet and ground troops are no longer present." The room fell silent as the council members processed this shocking development. The Supreme Commander leaned forward, his expression stern. "Explain, Inquisitor." "We're still analyzing the data, but it appears that the humans have withdrawn entirely. There are no signs of their presence in the system," Mark said, his voice steady despite his racing thoughts. Grand Admiral Island frowned. "This doesn't make sense. Why would they abandon such a strategic position?" "We're not sure, sir. It's possible they detected our movements and decided to retreat to avoid a counterattack," Mark suggested. The Supreme Commander nodded slowly. It's a plausible explanation. We must remain vigilant and prepared for any eventuality. Continue monitoring the situation and report any new developments immediately. Yes, sir, Mark replied, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. As the meeting ended, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The humans had vanished too quickly, too completely. There had to be more to this situation than met the eye. Over the next few rotations, Mark and his team continued their surveillance, but the sumac system remained eerily quiet. It was as if the humans had never been there. The council decided to fortify their positions, anticipating a possible human counterattack. Then, without warning, the other shoe dropped. Reports came in from the Jacker system, under heavy human assault. The enemy had taken advantage of the reduced defenses and launched a massive offensive, overwhelming the remaining Xenon forces. Mark's heart sank as he read the reports. The Jacker system had fallen, the Fifth Fleet destroyed, and the army group guarding it decimated. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. They had been duped. The entire buildup in the sumac system had been a ruse, a brilliant deception to draw Xenon forces away from their true target. The Supreme Commander called an emergency meeting. The communication sphere activated, and Mark stood before the council, his mind racing with the implications of their failure. Inquisitor Harris, explain how this happened, the Supreme Commander demanded, his voice icy. Mark took a deep breath. The humans orchestrated an elaborate deception. The buildup in the sumac system was a ploy to divert our attention and forces. They created the illusion of a massive threat while planning to strike the Jacker system, which we left vulnerable. The council members looked grim. Grand Admiral Island spoke up. This was a masterstroke of strategy. We underestimated their cunning and paid the price. The Supreme Commander nodded. Indeed, we must learn from this and adapt. Inquisitor Harris, your work is not done. We need you to uncover any other deceptions and help us formulate a new strategy. Yes, sir, Mark replied, determined to redeem himself and protect the Empire from further harm. As the meeting ended, Mark felt a renewed sense of purpose. The humans had outsmarted them this time, but he would ensure it never happened again. The battle for the future of Xenon was far from over, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Inquisitor Harris stood on the bridge of the Aurora, staring at the star map displayed before him. The loss of the Jacker system had dealt a significant blow to the Xenon Empire, and the High Command was still reeling from the deception. Harris, however, was determined to uncover the full extent of the human strategy and prevent any further surprises. Begin analysis of all recent intelligence reports, Harris ordered his team. We need to identify any patterns or anomalies that might indicate human movements or plans. As his officers set to work, Harris reflected on the events of the past weeks. The humans had proven themselves to be far more cunning than he had anticipated. They had orchestrated a grand deception, drawing Xenon forces away from their true target and striking with devastating precision. But Harris was not about to let that happen again. Hours passed as the team pored over data, cross-referencing reports and scanning for anything that stood out. Harris himself remained at the forefront, scrutinizing every piece of information with meticulous care. Sir, we've found something, one of his analysts called out. There are unusual energy readings coming from the Eclairant system. Harris moved quickly to the analyst's station. Explain. The analyst brought up the data on her screen. These readings are consistent with the energy signatures of human ships, but there's an irregular pattern. It's as if they're trying to mask their presence, similar to what we saw in the sumac system before their buildup. Harris nodded thoughtfully. Good work. This could be the lead we need. Prepare a reconnaissance probe and send it to the Eclairant system immediately. The analyst saluted, and within moments, the probe was on its way. Harris knew it would take some time for the probe to reach its destination and gather data, but he was confident they were on the right track. As the probe journeyed through space, Harris continued to oversee other intelligence operations, ensuring that every potential threat was monitored. He could not afford to be caught off guard again. 2 days later, the probe returned its findings. Harris gathered his team in the command center, eager to review the data. The holographic display lit up with images and readings from the Eclairant system. Harris's eyes narrowed as he saw the scattered signatures of human ships partially concealed by the natural radiation of the system's star. This confirms our suspicions, Harris said, addressing his team. The humans are attempting to mask their presence. They must be planning something significant in the Eclairon system. One of his officers, Lieutenant Marks, spoke up. Do you think this could be another diversion, sir? It's possible, Harris admitted, but we can't take any chances. We need to gather more intelligence and prepare our forces for any eventuality. He turned to another officer. Lieutenant, prepare a second probe with enhanced stealth capabilities. I want to get closer to those ships and see exactly what they're up to. The officer nodded and quickly set to work. Harris knew they were operating on borrowed time. The humans had already proven their ability to strike unexpectedly, and he could not allow another system to fall. As the second probe made its way to the Eclairon system, Harris briefed the Supreme Commander and the High Council on their findings. The council members were understandably wary, given the recent deception, but they agreed that further investigation was necessary. Days turned into weeks as the probe relayed its findings back to the Aurora. Harris and his team analyzed the data meticulously, uncovering more details about the human activity in the Eclairon system. They discovered signs of ship construction, troop movements, and even the establishment of new bases. It looks like they're setting up another forward operating base, Lieutenant Marks observed. But why here? Harris considered the question. The Eclairon system is strategically positioned near several key Xenon worlds. If they establish a stronghold here, they could launch attacks on multiple fronts. He turned to his team, determination in his eyes. We need to act quickly. Prepare a report for the Supreme Commander. Recommend immediate deployment of reconnaissance forces to the Eclairon system. We must confirm the extent of the human buildup and prepare our defenses. As his officers carried out his orders, Harris felt a renewed sense of purpose. The humans had caught them off guard once, but he was determined to prevent it from happening again. The battle for the Eclairon system would be crucial in determining the future of the Xenon Empire. Later that night, as Harris reviewed the final details of the report, he couldn't shake a nagging feeling of uncertainty. The humans had proven to be masters of deception, and he couldn't help but wonder if there was another layer to their strategy that he had yet to uncover. But for now, he focused on the task at hand. The Eclairon system would be their next battleground, and he intended to ensure that the Xenon forces were prepared for whatever the humans had in store. The Aurora raced through the star-studded expanse of space towards the Eclairon system, its crew tense and alert. Inquisitor Mark Harris stood on the bridge, his mind focused on the mission ahead. The stakes had never been higher, and the Xenon Empire could not afford another failure. "Status report?" Harris demanded, his voice cutting through the hum of the ship's engines. Lieutenant Marks quickly responded, "We're approaching the Eclairon system, sir. All reconnaissance probes are online and feeding us real-time data. No signs of enemy detection so far." Harris nodded, pleased with the progress. "Good. Maintain stealth protocols. We need to gather as much information as possible before making any moves." As the Aurora neared the edge of the Eclairon system, the crew prepared for the delicate task of deploying their probes. Each probe was equipped with advanced stealth technology, designed to penetrate the human defenses without being detected. "Deploy the probes," Harris ordered. One by one, the probes launched from the Aurora, disappearing into the void. Harris watched the holographic display, tracking their movements as they entered the system. The data began to stream in, revealing a bustling hub of activity. Human ships patrolled the perimeter, and construction was underway on several new bases. "Just as we suspected," Harris muttered. "They're building up their forces here." Lieutenant Marks pointed to a cluster of readings on the display. "Sir, these energy signatures match those of human capital ships. It looks like they're amassing a fleet." Harris's eyes narrowed. This could be their staging ground for a larger offensive. "We need to find out their target." The probes continued to relay information, painting a clearer picture of the human operations. Harris's team worked tirelessly, analyzing the data and identifying key strategic points within the system. "Sir, we've intercepted communications between the human ships," one of the analysts reported. "It seems they're planning to launch an assault within the next few rotations." Harris's mind raced. "Can you determine their target?" The analyst shook her head. "Not yet, sir. The transmissions are heavily encrypted. Harris clenched his fists, frustration boiling within him. They needed that information. Without it, they were flying blind. Keep working on those encryptions, he ordered. In the meantime, we need to prepare for the worst. Lieutenant Marks, alert the fleet. I want all available ships ready to move at a moment's notice. Marks saluted and relayed the orders. The Aurora's crew sprang into action, preparing for the imminent confrontation. Harris knew they were racing against the clock. As the hours ticked by, the tension on the bridge grew palpable. The probes continued their surveillance, inching closer to the human forces. Finally, a breakthrough came. "Sir, we've cracked part of the encryption," the analyst announced, excitement in her voice. "It looks like they're planning to hit the Vesta system." Harris's eyes widened. The Vesta system was a vital supply hub for the Xenon Empire, essential for maintaining their war effort. Losing it would be a devastating blow. "Relay this information to the Supreme Commander immediately," Harris said. "We need to mobilize our defenses in the Vesta system and prepare for their arrival." The analyst quickly sent the message, and Harris turned his attention back to the holographic display. They still had a chance to turn the tide, but it would require swift and decisive action. "Lieutenant Marks, deploy our fleet to the Vesta system," Harris ordered. "We need to get there before the humans do." The Aurora and its accompanying ships altered course, their engines roaring to life as they sped towards the Vesta system. Harris knew they were in for a fierce battle, but he was determined to protect his people and their territory. As they approached the Vesta system, the fleet fell into formation, readying themselves for the impending clash. Harris stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Prepare for engagement," he commanded. "We must hold the line at all costs." The first signs of the human fleet appeared on the scanners, their ships emerging from hyperspace with a menacing presence. Harris felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment of truth. "All ships, open fire," Harris shouted. The Xenon fleet unleashed a barrage of laser fire and missile strikes, lighting up the void with explosions. The human ships responded in kind, and the battle was joined. Harris coordinated the fleet's movements with precision, directing their firepower at the most critical targets. The Aurora's weapons blazed, taking down several enemy vessels. But the humans fought fiercely, their tactics unpredictable and their resolve unwavering. "Sir, their flagship is targeting us," Lieutenant Marks warned. "Evade and return fire," Harris ordered. "We need to take it out." The Aurora maneuvered skillfully, dodging the incoming fire while launching its own counterattacks. The battle raged on, with neither side willing to give an inch. As the minutes turned into hours, the toll of the conflict became evident. Both fleets suffered heavy losses, and the Vesta system's space was littered with the wreckage of destroyed ships. But the Xenon forces held their ground, refusing to back down. Finally, the tide began to turn. The relentless assault of the Xenon fleet started to break through the human defenses. Harris saw an opening and seized it. "All units, focus fire on their flagship," he commanded. "Let's end this." The combined firepower of the Xenon fleet converged on the human flagship, overwhelming its shields and tearing through its hull. A massive explosion erupted, signaling the destruction of the enemy command ship. Cheers erupted on the bridge of the Aurora. Harris allowed himself a moment of relief. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. "Well done, everyone," Harris said, his voice firm. "We've defended the Vesta system, but we must remain vigilant. The humans will not give up easily." As the remnants of the human fleet retreated, Harris knew they had bought themselves some time. But he also knew that the humans were cunning adversaries, and they would undoubtedly regroup and strike again. Returning to his quarters, Harris reflected on the day's events. The victory had been hard-fought, but it had also revealed the true extent of the human threat. They were more resourceful and determined than he had ever imagined. The battle for the Xenon Empire was far from over, and Harris was more determined than ever to uncover the full scope of the human plans. The survival of his people depended on it. As he prepared for the next phase of the conflict, Harris vowed to stay one step ahead of the enemy. The humans had shown their hand, and now it was his turn to outsmart them. The fate of the Xenon Empire hung in the balance, and he would stop at nothing to ensure their victory.